The kitchen clock read 2:47 a.m. when I heard Lauren's heels clicking across our hardwood floor. I'd been sitting there in the dark for 3 hours, nursing cold coffee and watching the driveway through our window. My auto shop had closed at 6, but sleep wasn't happening tonight. Not after what Rita told me at the shipwreck earlier. "Sean?" Lauren's voice carried that fake surprise she'd perfected over our 8 years of marriage. "What are you doing up?" I turned on the overhead light. She stood there in her black cocktail dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. Her makeup was smudged and she smelled like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. "Waiting," I said, keeping my voice level. "Rita mentioned you were at the marina tonight. Funny thing is, you told me you were working late." Lauren's face shifted through emotions like a slot machine. Surprise, guilt, defiance, then something I'd never seen before. Cold calculation. "We need to talk," she said, pulling out a chair across from me. "I've been thinking about us, about what I want." "What you want?" I leaned back, crossing my arms. "This should be interesting." She straightened her shoulders and I recognized the posture from her HR training seminars. Professional, detached, like she was firing an employee. "I'm not happy, Sean. I haven't been for a long time." Her voice took on that rehearsed quality. "I've reconnected with Jake, and I realize what I've been missing." Jake Dalton, her high school boyfriend who'd rolled back into town 6 months ago with his yacht brokerage and gym-sculpted chest. I'd seen him around, always flashing that practice smile and designer watch. "So you're having an affair," I said. "I'm exploring my options." She tilted her head. "And I want to be honest about it." The audacity hit me like a wrench to the gut. 8 years of marriage, and she was sitting there discussing her infidelity like a business proposal. "Here's what's going to happen," she continued, her voice gaining confidence. "You have 2 choices. You can accept that I need this relationship with Jake, maybe even join us sometimes, or you can stay out of my way while I figure things out." I stared at her, processing what I'd just heard. The woman I'd married, who'd promised to love and honor me, was offering me a front-row seat to her betrayal. "Those are my options?" I asked quietly. "Those are your options." She nodded, satisfied with herself. "I'm not going to sneak around anymore. I'm done pretending." Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger. That would come later. This was clarity, sharp and clean as a blade. "Option 3, I said, standing up. "Start packing before I rearrange his face." Lauren's confident mask slipped. "Sean, don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You just told your husband you want to cheat openly and I'm being dramatic?" She stood too, her heels clicking as she backed toward the hallway. "You're not going to do anything stupid. You're too smart for that." "You're right. I am smart." I watched her retreat. "Smart enough to know when I'm being played." She paused at the doorway. "This doesn't have to be ugly, Sean." "Too late for that." After she left, I sat back down and pulled out my phone. Lauren had always been careless with her passwords, our anniversary date for everything. Her phone was charging on the counter, and she'd forgotten to take it in her dramatic exit. The messages made my stomach turn. Not just the explicit texts with Jake, but the group chat with her friends Melanie and Cassie. They'd been planning this for weeks, discussing how to handle Sean and whether he'd make a scene. Melanie had even suggested recording his reaction for entertainment. But the worst part was the hotel reservation confirmation, the Ocean View Inn, booked for the entire weekend. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a romantic getaway on my dime. I screenshot everything, then put her phone back exactly where I'd found it. Walking to my workshop in the garage, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and deep, but it was being overshadowed by something else. Purpose. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Lauren thought she was playing chess, moving pieces around the board while I sat there like a helpless pawn. She had no idea she'd just declared war on someone who'd built a business from nothing, who'd learned to fight in amateur boxing rings, and who knew every secret in this small town. I opened my laptop and started making lists: bank accounts, joint assets, mutual friends, social media passwords, Lauren's professional contacts. The sun was coming up when I finally went to bed, but I wasn't tired anymore. I had work to do. Let the games begin. I woke up at 5:30, same as always. Lauren was still asleep, probably dreaming about her weekend plans. I made coffee quietly and headed to the garage. Her car sat in the driveway like a silver accusation. A 2019 Honda Accord that I'd co-signed for, but she'd never bothered to get titled in her name. Technically, it was my car. By 6 a.m., it was locked in my shop's secure bay, drained of gas, and sitting on blocks. Mick arrived at 7, whistling some old rock song until he saw Lauren's car. "Boss, please tell me you're not working on your wife's ride at dawn because you're a romantic fool." "Romantic fool phase is over," I said, handing him the keys. "Listed online, fair market value, cash only." Mick's weathered face split into a grin. "Now we're talking. What's the story?" I filled him in while we worked. Mick had been my mechanic for 5 years, and he'd seen Lauren's entitled attitude firsthand. By the time I finished explaining, he was practically rubbing his hands together. "So, what's the plan, boss?" Phase 1, inconvenience. Phase 2, embarrassment. Phase 3, total social destruction. I love Phase 3 already. At 8:30, I called the bank. Joint accounts frozen pending divorce proceedings. Lauren's credit cards, all tied to my accounts, canceled. Her gym membership, her spa appointments, her monthly massage package, all canceled. My phone started buzzing around 9. Lauren, discovering her transportation situation. "Sean, where's my car?" "Which car? The one I own?" "Don't be petty, I need to get to work." "Call Jake. I'm sure he'll give you a ride." The line went quiet. Then, "You can't do this." "Watch me." I hung up and headed to the Shipwreck for lunch. Rita was behind the bar, polishing glasses with the focused intensity of someone who'd been listening to gossip all morning. "Heard you had some excitement at home," she said without looking up. "News travels fast." "Melanie was in here an hour ago, running her mouth about how Lauren's finally living her truth." Rita's voice dripped sarcasm. "Also mentioned they're planning some big romantic weekend at the marina." "The marina?" Rita leaned closer. "Jake's got his yacht docked there. Word is they're planning to take it out for a little cruise. Very public, very obvious." I nursed my beer and thought about that. Jake's yacht was his pride and joy, a 30-foot cabin cruiser he'd named Second Chance. He used it to impress potential clients and, apparently, other men's wives. "Rita, you know everything that happens in this town. Occupational hazard. Jake's boat, where exactly is it moored?" She smiled. "Slip 14, right where everyone can see it." After lunch, Mick and I took a drive to the marina. Jake's yacht gleamed in the afternoon sun, all white fiberglass and chrome fittings. A few other boat owners were around working on their vessels or just enjoying the day. "Nice boat," Mick said loudly enough for others to hear. "Shame about the owner being a homewrecker." We walked the docks casually, Mick chatting with the other boaters while I studied Jake's setup. Security cameras covered the main areas, but the individual slips had blind spots. That evening, after the marina closed, we returned with supplies. Nothing illegal, just creative redecoration. Vaseline spread thin on the windshield, creating a film that would be nearly impossible to see through. Fish guts from the bait shop, carefully placed under the seat cushions where they'd ripen in the sun. And on the side windows, painted in bright red washable paint. "Cheater." "Think he'll get the message?" Mick asked, admiring our handiwork. "If he doesn't, The smell will remind him. The next morning brought a string of angry texts from Lauren. She'd borrowed Melanie's car to get to work, only to discover that someone had anonymously emailed her boss copies of her explicit text conversations with Jake. "You're pathetic," she texted. "This is harassment." I replied, "Harassment is lying to your husband for months. This is consequences." My phone rang immediately. Lauren, furious. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" "I think I'm getting started." "Two can play this game, Sean. Don't forget that." She hung up, and within an hour I understood what she meant. My business's Facebook page had been hacked, the password changed. Posts appeared claiming I was having a mental breakdown, that customers should be careful trusting their vehicles to someone going through a difficult personal situation. I called 3 of my regular clients. 2 had already seen the posts and were concerned. The third, old Mrs. Patterson, was pulling her Buick out of my shop that afternoon. "Nothing personal, Sean," she said, "but I can't afford any drama with my car." That stung. I'd built my reputation over 10 years of honest work and fair prices. Lauren was attacking the one thing I'd never compromise, my professional integrity. But she'd made a mistake. The Facebook hack was traceable, and I knew a guy who owed me a favor. By evening, I had proof that the posts came from Lauren's work computer, complete with timestamps and IP addresses. I also had something else. My friend Danny worked security at the Ocean View Inn. For $50, he'd agreed to text me when Jake and Lauren checked in. The text came at 7:23 p.m. "They're here, room 237, acting like they own the place." I drove to the motel and parked across the street. Through the window of room 237, I could see them clearly. Jake, shirtless and cocky, gesturing wildly as he told some story. Lauren, laughing like she hadn't laughed with me in years. I took photos, video, enough to document their affair beyond any doubt. But as I sat there watching my wife with another man, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but it was being consumed by something colder and more focused. They weren't just cheating. They were celebrating it, flaunting it, making a mockery of everything I'd thought we had. Lauren thought she was playing chess, moving pieces around the board while I reacted predictably. She had no idea she'd just declared war on someone who'd learned that the best defense is a devastating offense. I started the car and drove home, already planning my next move. They were playing chess. I was flipping the board. Saturday morning brought the annual Harbor Days festival, where half the town gathered at the waterfront for food trucks, craft booths, and the kind of small-town socializing that could make or break reputations. I arrived early and positioned myself near the coffee stand, watching the crowd gather. Lauren appeared around 10, arm in arm with Jake, both of them dressed like they were auditioning for a yacht club catalog. The whispers started immediately. In a town of 8,000, Lauren's suspension from work was already common knowledge, and seeing her parading around with Jake confirmed every rumor. "Sean!" Melanie's voice cut through the crowd like a rusty knife. She approached with her usual swagger, clearly planning to make a scene. "How are you holding up, honey?" "Never better," I said, loud enough for the growing audience to hear. It must be so hard, watching Lauren finally find happiness. Melanie's smile was pure poison. "But you should be happy for her. She deserves someone who appreciates her." The crowd was definitely listening now. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio recording I'd prepared. Melanie's own voice from a conversation Rita had recorded 2 weeks ago. "Lauren's just using Jake for attention." Melanie's voice played clearly through my phone's speaker. "She'll dump him the second she gets bored. Poor guy has no idea what he's gotten himself into." Melanie's face went white. The crowd murmured, phones appearing to record the drama. "Funny how your story keeps changing," I said, pocketing the phone. Jake stepped forward, his chest puffed out like a rooster. "You got something to say to me, Dwyer?" "Just wondering if you know about Lauren's history with temporary interests." I kept my voice conversational. Ask her about her yoga instructor phase, or the personal trainer, or that real estate agent from Portland. Lauren grabbed Jake's arm. He's lying. Am I? I pulled out a manila envelope. Because I've got documentation going back 3 years. The crowd pressed closer. Jake's confident expression wavered. You're pathetic, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm thorough. I handed the envelope to the nearest bystander, an elderly woman I recognized from the hardware store. Mrs. Chen, would you mind reading the first page out loud? Mrs. Chen adjusted her glasses and began reading Lauren's text messages to her yoga instructor from 2 years ago. The explicit content made several people gasp, and phones started recording in earnest. Stop, Lauren hissed. This is private. Was private, I corrected. You made it public when you decided honesty was your new policy. Jake tried to salvage the situation. Come on, Lauren, we don't need this drama. But Lauren was staring at me with something approaching respect. For the first time in months, I had her complete attention. This isn't over, she said quietly. You're right, it's just getting started. They left together, but the damage was done. By afternoon, the videos were circulating on social media, and Lauren's reputation was becoming the town's favorite topic. I spent the rest of the festival working the crowd, playing the role of the wronged husband with just enough dignity to earn sympathy without seeming bitter. Old friends offered support. Business owners promised to spread the word about Lauren's Facebook sabotage. Even Mrs. Patterson apologized and asked when she could bring her Buick back. But the real victory came at closing time, when Rita texted me from the shipwreck. Jake's here alone, looking miserable. Lauren dumped him an hour ago. I drove to the bar and found Jake slumped over a whiskey, his yacht club confidence completely deflated. Rough day? I asked, taking the stool beside him. He looked up with red-rimmed eyes. She used me, man. Soon as things got complicated, she bailed. Lauren's good at that. I thought she loved me. He laughed bitterly. Turns out she just loved the idea of making you jealous. I bought him a drink. Jake, let me give you some advice. Stay away from my wife. This whole thing, it's not about you, it's about her needing to feel important. What if I don't want to stay away? I turned to face him fully. Then you'll discover that embarrassing you at a town festival was me being nice. Jake studied my face and apparently decided I wasn't bluffing. He finished his drink and left without another word. Rita wiped down the bar with a satisfied smile. Think that's the end of it? Not even close. Lauren's not done fighting, and neither am I. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. You think you've won something, but this is just the beginning. I know things about you, too. I showed the message to Rita, who snorted. What's she gonna do, tell people you work too hard and fix cars honestly? She'll find something. Lauren's creative when she's desperate. But as I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. For the first time since this nightmare started, I was setting the pace instead of reacting to Lauren's moves. The festival had been a test run. Now I knew exactly how far I could push before the town turned against me. I knew which friends were really friends and which were just enjoying the drama. Most importantly, I knew Lauren was starting to realize she'd underestimated her opponent. The real game was about to begin. Monday morning brought retaliation. I arrived at the shop to find my front windows covered in spray paint, abuser and liar in bright red letters. Security cameras had caught the vandals, Lauren and Cassie, working by streetlight at 3 a.m. But Lauren had overplayed her hand. Vandalism was a crime, and she'd done it on camera. I called the police and filed a report, then called my insurance company. By noon, the windows were being replaced, and I had official documentation of Lauren's escalating behavior. Mick arrived to find me pressure washing paint off the sidewalk. She's getting desperate, he observed. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. The police visit came that afternoon. Officer Martinez, a guy I'd known since high school, took my statement and reviewed the security footage. Sean, I gotta ask, is there any truth to what she's claiming? You mean, have I ever hit my wife? I met his eyes. Never. Not once. You can ask anyone who knows us. I believe you, but she's filing countercharges, claims you've been stalking and harassing her. I handed him a folder I'd prepared. Text messages, social media posts, and witness statements. Everything I've done has been legal and documented. Martinez flipped through the evidence. This is thorough. I learned from the best. Remember when you helped me document that insurance fraud case 3 years ago? He smiled grimly. Yeah, I remember. You don't do anything halfway. That evening, Lauren's lawyer called. A slick guy from Portland who specialized in divorce cases. Mr. Dwyer, my client is prepared to be reasonable if you'll agree to mediation. Define reasonable. 50-50 split of assets, joint custody, and a mutual non-disclosure agreement. I laughed. Your client cheated on me, vandalized my business, and tried to destroy my reputation. Now she wants half of everything I built? My client is willing to overlook your harassment campaign. Harassment? I interrupted. Counselor, everything I've done is documented and legal. Can your client say the same? The line went quiet. Then, we'll be in touch. But Lauren wasn't done. Wednesday brought a new attack. She'd contacted my suppliers, claiming I was behind on payments and asking them to demand cash up front. 2 of them called to verify, concerned about rumors of my business failing. I spent the morning on the phone, reassuring vendors and providing bank statements to prove my financial stability. The lies were easily disproven, but they cost me time and credibility. That night, I decided to visit Jake's marina again. Not for sabotage this time, for reconnaissance. I found him working on his boat, trying to scrub the last traces of paint from the windows. The fish smell was gone, but his pride was still damaged. Evening, Jake. He looked up warily. Sean, come to gloat. Actually, I came to warn you. Lauren's getting desperate, and desperate people drag everyone down with them. What do you mean? I sat on the dock beside his boat. She's trying to destroy my business, filing false police reports, making up stories about abuse. You really want to be associated with that? Jake set down his scrub brush. She told me you were stalking her. I documented her affair and made it public. That's not stalking. That's consequences. She seemed really scared. Of losing control, I interrupted. Not of me. Lauren's never been afraid of me, Jake. She's afraid of being held accountable. I pulled out my phone and showed him the security footage of Lauren vandalizing my shop. She did this Monday night. Does that look like someone who's afraid or someone who's angry she got caught? Jake watched the video twice, his expression growing troubled. Look, I continued, I don't like you. You participated in wrecking my marriage, but Lauren's using you just like she used me. The difference is, I'm fighting back. You're just along for the ride. What are you saying? I'm saying cut your losses before she drags you down too, because this isn't over, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I don't want out? Then you'd better lawyer up, because Lauren's about to find out what happens when you mess with someone who has nothing left to lose. I left him sitting there, staring at his half-cleaned boat. By morning, Rita had texted me that Jake had been at the shipwreck until closing time, drinking alone and asking questions about Lauren's history with other men. The cracks were showing. Lauren's alliance was fracturing, and her support system was beginning to doubt her story. But I knew she had one more play left. Lauren was never more dangerous than when she felt cornered, and I'd been systematically removing her options for weeks. The final confrontation was coming, and I wanted to be ready. Thursday brought the town council meeting, held monthly at the community center. Normally, these meetings drew maybe 20 people, mostly retirees with complaints about street maintenance. but word had spread about the Dwyer marriage drama, and the parking lot was packed. I arrived early and took a seat in the back row. Lauren entered with Melanie and Cassie flanking her like bodyguards, all three dressed professionally and carrying folders. The mayor, a decent guy named Tom Brennan who'd bought parts from my shop for years, called the meeting to order. After the usual business, budget reports, permit applications, complaints about loose dogs, he opened the floor for public comments. Lauren stood first. "Mr. Mayor, I'm here to report a pattern of harassment and intimidation by my estranged husband." Her voice carried the practiced authority of her HR training. "Sean Dwyer has been stalking me, vandalizing property, and spreading malicious lies throughout our community." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lauren had their attention. "I have documentation of his behavior," she continued, holding up her folder. "Text messages, witness statements, and evidence of his campaign to destroy my reputation and career." She painted a picture of an abusive husband who couldn't accept rejection, a dangerous man who'd escalated from emotional manipulation to criminal behavior. It was a compelling performance, delivered with just the right mix of vulnerability and strength. When she finished, the room was quiet. Several people were looking at me with concern, and I realized how carefully she'd crafted this narrative. Then Tom Brennan called for other speakers. I stood up slowly, making sure everyone could see me clearly. "Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the opportunity to respond to these accusations." I kept my voice calm and reasonable. "Mrs. Dwyer is correct that I've been documenting behavior, but not hers. Mine." I opened my own folder, much thicker than Lauren's. "Every action I've taken in the past 2 weeks has been legal, documented, and witnessed. I have security footage, bank records, police reports, and testimony from multiple sources." I began laying out the evidence methodically. Lauren's affair, documented with photos and text messages. Her vandalism of my business, caught on security cameras. Her attempts to sabotage my professional relationships, with recorded phone calls and email evidence. "Mrs. Dwyer claims I'm harassing her," I continued. "But harassment implies unwanted contact. I haven't called her, visited her, or initiated any communication since she moved out. What I have done is respond to her attacks on my business and reputation." The crowd was shifting now, phones appearing as people started recording. "She claims I'm spreading lies, but everything I've shared is documented fact. She claims I'm dangerous, but the only property damage in this situation was done by her, to my business, on camera." I turned to face Lauren directly. "Mrs. Dwyer wants to be the victim in this story, but victims don't vandalize businesses. Victims don't try to destroy careers. Victims don't coordinate harassment campaigns with their friends." Melanie stood up angrily. "You're twisting everything. Am I?" I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording of Melanie discussing Lauren's affairs. "This is you, 2 weeks ago, describing Lauren's pattern of cheating. Should I play the rest?" Melanie sat down quickly, her face red. Tom Brennan looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Dwyer, this seems like a private matter." "It became public when Mrs. Dwyer made it public," I replied. "When she decided to use this forum to attack my character, she opened the door to rebuttal." I faced the crowd again. "I built my business in this town over 10 years. I've employed local people, supported local causes, and earned my reputation through honest work. Mrs. Dwyer is trying to destroy that because she can't accept the consequences of her choices." The room was completely quiet now. "I'm not the victim here," I concluded. "But I'm not the villain either. I'm just a man who refuses to be destroyed by someone else's lies." I sat down, and the silence stretched for several seconds. Then old Mrs. Chen started clapping. Others joined in, and soon most of the room was applauding. Lauren's face was pale with fury. She gathered her papers and stalked out, followed by her diminished support team. After the meeting, people approached me with handshakes and words of support. Several business owners offered partnerships or referrals. The tide of public opinion had turned decisively, but I knew Lauren wouldn't give up easily. Cornered animals fight hardest, and she still had cards to play. I was right. The next morning brought a final, desperate gambit. Lauren had contacted the state licensing board, claiming I'd been working on vehicles without proper certification. It was a lie, but it would trigger an investigation that could shut down my business for weeks. She'd also filed for a restraining order, claiming I'd threatened her at the town meeting. Another lie, but one that would require a court hearing to disprove. Her lawyer called with a new offer: drop all charges and investigations in exchange for a favorable divorce settlement. She's offering you 60% of assets and primary custody, he said. It's a generous offer. It's extortion, I replied, and the answer is no. Mr. Dwyer, my client has evidence that could seriously damage your reputation. Your client has lies that I can disprove in court. Tell her I'll see her at the hearing. But as I hung up, I realized Lauren had forced my hand. She was willing to destroy everything, my business, my reputation, even her own credibility, rather than accept defeat. It was time to end this. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Friday morning at the county courthouse. I arrived early with my lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Wells, who specialized in family law. Remember, Patricia said as we walked up the courthouse steps, let her talk first. She's going to paint herself as the victim, but she'll overreach. They always do. The courtroom was small, but packed. Word had spread through town, and the gallery was filled with familiar faces. Rita from the shipwreck sat in the front row, along with Mick and several of my customers. Lauren entered with her Portland lawyer and took the plaintiff's table. She looked professional and composed, but I caught the slight tremor in her hands as she arranged her papers. Judge Patricia Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, called the hearing to order. This is a request for a temporary restraining order, she began. Mrs. Dwyer, you may present your case. Lauren stood and delivered a polished performance. She described a pattern of escalating harassment, claiming I'd threatened her at the town meeting and made her fear for her safety. Your Honor, my husband has become obsessed with punishing me for ending our marriage. He's destroyed my career, turned the community against me, and made increasingly threatening statements. She presented her evidence. Screenshots of social media posts, witness statements from Melanie and Cassie, and a recording of our phone conversation where I'd said, "This isn't over." It was compelling theater, and I could see some sympathy in the judge's expression. Then Patricia stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Dwyer, when did you first feel threatened by your husband? When he started stalking me and spreading lies about my personal life. I see. And when did you vandalize his business? Lauren's composure slipped slightly. I don't know what you mean. Patricia played the security footage on her laptop, projecting it onto the courtroom screen. Lauren and Cassie, clearly visible, spray painting my windows. This was 3 days after you claimed to have first felt threatened. Does this look like the behavior of someone who fears for their safety? I was defending myself. By committing vandalism? Mrs. Dwyer, how exactly does spray painting someone's business windows constitute self-defense? The judge leaned forward, clearly interested in the answer. Lauren fumbled for words. He was destroying my reputation by documenting your affair. Mrs. Dwyer, did your husband ever physically threaten you? He said he would rearrange Jake's face. Did he threaten you? Well, no, but did he ever contact you after you moved out? Not directly, but yes or no, Mrs. Dwyer. Did your husband initiate any contact with you after you separated? Lauren was silent for several seconds. No. Patricia turned to the judge. Your Honor, Mrs. Dwyer has presented no evidence of actual threats or harassment directed at her. What she has presented is evidence of her own criminal behavior and a pattern of making false accusations. She handed a folder to the bailiff. This contains documentation of Mrs. Dwyer's attempts to sabotage my client's business relationships, her coordination of harassment campaigns, and her filing of false reports with various agencies. The judge reviewed the documents while the courtroom waited in tense silence. "Mrs. Dwyer," Judge Morrison said finally, "your petition lacks credible evidence of threatening behavior. What it does contain is evidence that you've engaged in harassment, vandalism, and filing false reports." She closed the folder with a sharp snap. "Petition denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for possible prosecution of perjury and filing false reports." Lauren's face went white. Her lawyer immediately requested a sidebar, but the damage was done. As we left the courthouse, Patricia smiled grimly. That went better than expected. She really overplayed her hand. The crowd from the gallery followed us outside, offering congratulations and support. But I was watching Lauren, who stood on the courthouse steps looking lost and defeated. Her support system had evaporated. Melanie and Cassie had distanced themselves after being exposed. Jake had ended their relationship days ago. Her job was gone, her reputation destroyed, and now she faced possible criminal charges. She caught my eye across the parking lot and walked over slowly. "You got what you wanted," she said quietly. "I got what you earned. I never meant for it to go this far. You meant every bit of it. You just thought you'd win." Lauren looked around at the dispersing crowd, at the town that had once respected her, at the ruins of the life she'd thrown away. "What happens now? Now you live with your choices, just like I'm living with mine." She nodded slowly and walked to her car, a rental, since I'd sold hers weeks ago. As she drove away, I felt something I hadn't expected: emptiness. The victory was complete, but it felt hollow. 8 years of marriage reduced to a legal proceeding and a parking lot conversation. Mick appeared beside me. "You okay, boss?" "Yeah, I'm okay." Rita joined us, grinning broadly. "Drinks are on the house tonight. The whole town's going to want to hear about this." That evening, the shipwreck was packed with people celebrating what they saw as justice served. I accepted the congratulations and free drinks, played the role of the vindicated husband, and tried to feel satisfied with the outcome. Lauren had lost everything: job, reputation, friends, and soon her freedom if the DA pressed charges. Jake had fled town, his yacht brokerage closed, and his own reputation in ruins. Melanie and Cassie were social pariahs, their participation in the harassment campaign having backfired spectacularly. I had won completely and decisively, but as I sat at the bar, surrounded by supporters and well-wishers, I realized that victory in a war like this doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like survival. The woman I'd loved enough to marry was gone, replaced by someone I'd had to destroy to protect myself. The life we'd built together was ashes. The future I'd imagined was canceled. I raised my glass to the crowd and smiled, because that's what winners do. But inside, I was already planning what came next. The shop needed rebuilding. My reputation needed restoration. And somewhere in this small town, there was probably a life worth living that didn't revolve around revenge. Lauren had offered me 2 choices: watch her cheat or get out of the way. I'd found option 3, and it had cost us both everything. But at least now, the games were finally over.